Hi, my name is Christopher Rauch. I'm a PhD student at Drexel University. I explore web archiving and also am working to train comprehensive data models based on the archival data. I developed this presentation with my colleague Travis Reid. Unfortunately, couldn't be here today. I'm advised by Professor Matt Kelly, and also advising the project are Professors Alex Poole, Michael Nelson, Michele Weigle. Today I'll talk about the significance of advertisements, not just as a means of marketing that reflect the social, cultural, and commercial histories of their time. The value of advertisements in traditional media has been recognized by different institutions. The Smithsonian, for instance, and Penn State University has archives that talk about traditional media, and also many of the institutions that are represented here carry such archives. And our contention is that these types of advertisements carry significant cultural data. They are contemporaneous mirrors of societal values, and sometimes they provide a more unfiltered view of topics than a published website. But as the web has grown, so have the challenges in archiving these large data sets, and legal constraints have also forced archives not to replay certain types of data, and exclusions have led to gaps because archivists have to make a trade-off between the ad-related content and the main content. And the Internet Archive, for instance, has had to make strategic decisions on certain types of topics, and the selective curation is important for balancing resources, but it also has a consequence. And this leaves a gap in the historical record when it comes to specific types of small history, we're calling it. The potential ads are being lost to future researchers, and we believe with this project we can preserve some of these advertisements so that people in the future can go back and get a more nuanced picture of cultural heritage as contained in advertisements in the broader context. Our starting ground is that, there you go. The web is a place where every pixel matters to the people that are actually posting that content. And we as archivists know this, that the content that's out there is deliberate, and even the advertisements that are part of this ecosystem are things that have creative expression behind them, and they have a purpose. And a lot of this, some of this creative intent is sometimes lost in the acrimony that is given to advertisements as commercial enterprises as somehow interfering with the actual content or as just an interruption in the content. But we think that the periodicity of, say, radio advertisements and internet advertisements as compared to each other show this similar kind of trend where eventually there's become an acceptance of the advertisements supporting the different the content they provide. And then looking back in history, we can see that there are certain cultural trends that are only reflected in the advertisements and that we might not know about. For instance, in print magazines, we had original advertisements for doctors who smoke cigarettes, those types of things. And it gives us a picture of the past that we might not have if we didn't have access to those things. So the Saving Ads Project, it's a collaborative effort between Drexel University and Old Dominion University in the United States. There's two different sets of researchers. One is qualitative, the other is quantitative. We've got the computer science end who helps with the archiving and the large-scale data analysis. And then the people who are the humanists who take a look at the web advertisements in context. And we're supported by a grant from IMLS, like many worthwhile projects. And we're talking about digital marketing material, though, in the broader context, trying to reflect a more integrated approach to looking at ads. And a big part of our research is the evolution of ads. And we think that there are very few paradigms in history where you can see the emergence of a medium like radio and internet. We couldn't really find that many other. I mean, print is an example, but it's very difficult to say when the first advertisement or even what the first advertisement was in print. But the digital interactions that are part of the engagement with websites, advertisements are part of those, whether whether we like it or not. And then preserving these artifacts this is a resource that future generations can access. And we call it small history, or I call it small history, because it's the daily interactions that people can look at, which it wasn't the case that you can look back, as we were just talking about the 60s, at the more nuanced interchanges that people had. And advertisements aren't necessarily like, they're reflective of some cultural influences. And humanists and those types of scholars can use those that information in order to get a fuller perspective on the past and on history. I just want to direct your attention to a slide and the visual dichotomy. Now, you see that's two versions of the BBC webpage, and one has embedded advertisements and the other doesn't. And if you just take a second and compare them, there is context here, and we're looking at two pages that one is breaking in the content provides context to the ads, but the ads also provide context to the content. So a historical record of this without the ads is sort of a sanitized version, and it doesn't convey the complete picture. And what we have here and what we're contending is that the one on the right has a more layered version of the web. And if we prioritize one sort of snapshot over the other, we might be looking at a historic a distortion. And it's valuable for people who study the content to understand also that there is a sort of metadata around the content that is contained in the advertisements themselves. And here also, there's two versions of the CNBC website. On the top right, you can see the trade station banner. And this is indicative of a certain niche market that is being targeted because of the domain, and that's advanced traders. And in the ad list version, you can see there's also a video link missing from TD Ameritrade and CME. And this isn't necessarily an advertisement. It's internal content that's being served, but it does have a sponsored, this is it, basis. And so there's a risk here when we're capturing ads that there's another form of distortion that because content is becoming so integrated with advertisements, and those two things are starting to merge. And this is something that to some people is an alarming trend, but it also is really what's reflected in the medium, and we'd like to be able to see that in the future. So there is a difference between these two pages, and whether or not it's valuable to preserve this is something that we believe it is. So here's a case study of the USA Today website. And just if you'll notice the banner at the top of the ad, there's a pretty prominent advertisement for a commercial enterprise. We've taken this with clearing the browser from any personal tracking cookies, but we still see that there might be some targeting here. There are commerce-related ads, and the ads appear on a news page. And when people are studying the context of advertisements and culture in general, these relationships might not be accidental. But whatever the relationship is, and the reflection of the times that the advertisement can provide to people, it's not random, and it's something that can have some influence on your future historian's picture of the culture of the day. And this is just a DOM view of the USA Today webpage, where there are many ways of embedding advertisements in web pages, but the most prominent is usually the Google Ads framework. And here, there's the iframe that's rendered that renders the ads themselves. And just as an interesting aside, there's an advertising, like an ARIA label with labeled advertisement, but there's no additional data there. So they're spared, the people who use the ARIA labels are spared from the additional advertisements, and you can argue that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it shows that there's a gap, and different audiences are presented with different things, and that's an important thing to understand, we think, in context. Here's a version of the USA Today web page. Can I go back? Yeah, without the advertisement. And I just wanted to point out here that what's missing here is the iframe. So the element that's not included in the page, this was retrieved from the Wayback Machine. And it's not that the content wasn't archived, it just wasn't rendered. And there are various reasons for the content not being rendered during replay. And it really depends on the types of tools that you use and how you reconstitute the web page. But basically, this is the majority of the ads that are of modern content are integrated using this technique. Older ads are more likely to be preserved because they are simpler and they're not necessarily dependent on complex scripts. But this is the most common or prevalent difficulty we've had with generating and replaying ads. This one is a common crawl recreation, and just looking at the visual content, you see that they're missing images and they're also missing ad data, but there's a layer of complexity for each one of those things. For the common crawl data, because the crawls are sometimes not in order, they're not linear, they might come in different temporal sequence, what happens is that you've got a box of puzzle pieces, and in order to reassemble it, you have to do a good deal of manipulation. In order to find the images, you have to read the byte stream from the archived from the segment in the common crawl data and reconstruct it, and then try and paste it back into the original location of the image. This is what happens. These are more accessible ads that you can find usually based on the URL, or you can extract them as, from some of their metadata or their even description as images. But this lacks context. So you can look at these ads and you can see that they have information and some metadata, but they lack some sort of context. And there is a broader conversation that people can have with the captures to understand what was going on in marketing, but also what was going on in the culture of the time. And this is another type of ad archive, which is something that was created by pressure for the vendors to show transparency, particularly for sensitive topics like Brexit and for the US presidential election. And these types of ads do offer a rich type of metadata, but it's metadata from a different perspective. It's metadata from targeting, from what context that might have originally appeared, from a sponsored viewpoint. But it also shows that there are different avenues to approach trying to retrieve advertising content. But this is another example. Here are industry archives, which show a good deal also of the creative endeavors behind and the marketing targeting and the type of research that people are doing, but also they're sort of context lists depending on your perspective. If you're an advertiser and you're trying to learn your demographic and how marketing targets work, then this is a good thing. But in the end, there's between all of these different things, there's a cost-benefit analysis. And I just wanted to say on the first slide is an image capture. The second one is an elongated image capture of the same thing. And the third is the interactive replay of the Wayback Machine. So all of these different things can be combined in order to have a fuller picture of the past. But this is a difficult process, and you can if you have a particular goal in mind or a particular topic, you can do the research to reconstruct the advertisements. But it is definitely a process, and we've been working on some additional tools that can maybe automate some of the issues. I just wanted to quickly cover, because I know I only have a minute left, that there were some sort of attempts to prevent ads from being captured that were based on URL patterns. This is slowly beginning to change. Ad-related file names were blocked, directory names were blocked, and an interesting one we found that was social media accounts with ad-related names were blocked. We actually communicated with the staff of the Internet Archive, and that was changed for us, so now we're able to archive them. And also replay issues. This is just an example of the type of replay issues with the interplay between the different elements. And when you're replaying the ads, there's a different random number that's generated. It's used for tracking purposes and also to prevent certain types of archiving. But this actually prevents the replay of ads without intervention. And this is a narrowing down of that. This is the safe frame URL with the random domain. And then finally, these present 4 different approaches to refining your capture if you're looking for different types of advertisements. It's the Replay Web's URL, displaying ads from our own tool, and there's a GitHub repository where we share that information. And then finally, I just wanted to invite the community to take a second look at advertisements as in less of a negative light than is traditional, because even if the advertisements aren't as valuable, the techniques for preserving them can be applied to different types of content. And the tools that we develop here can be reused. And I hope that our additional work will focus on personalizations and ads and the different representations that result from that. But that's my presentation. Thank you very much.